Hey, welcome to another podcast with NECKROOTS. I'm Kit James.
Austin Davis.
And today we're talking about the power of persistence.
Power of persistence. Well, hey, nothing worthwhile has ever been achieved without persistence, right, Kit?
Right, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, as I was thinking about this topic today, I went back to the story that you told a while ago about the cow and the buffalo,
Yeah.
right? And just a short recap, when a storm is coming, the cow always runs away from the storm. The buffalo turns around and charges towards the storm.
Right.
And in our pursuit of becoming, right, whatever that is for you, Neck Nation, whether, whatever aspect of your life you're trying to improve upon, or whether you're just trying to become in general, right, nothing is more important, right, than persistence. And we've got to be the buffalo in this situation. We got to charge these storms, right? We got to be able to face whatever it is that's coming at us and continue to move forward, right? Don't quit, all these things. Don't quit, move forward, fight. All this stuff refers to our persistence in these situations.
Fight like the third monkey trying to get on Noah's Ark.
That's the one, dude.
Austin, that's good. And when I think about persistence, there's so much evidence around us, right? If you look at persistent people and what does that mean and what are the results and what are the outcomes, there's so many people, Neck Nation. There's Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, there's Colonel Sanders, Steve Jobs, Walt Disney. I mean, we could go on and on and on. There's Thomas Edison. These dudes are persistent.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, 100% persistent. And you think about it, Abraham Lincoln, for example.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, dude, this guy, he has a story.
Oh, he's got and the world would be the whole world would be a completely different place.
Right.
If it wasn't for Abraham Lincoln.
So, I mean, just taking some of Abe's stats, at age 21, he had a failed business. Failed again in business at age 24.
Yeah.
And then he had a sweetheart that died at age 26. He had a nervous breakdown at age 27. Lost a congressional race at age 34 and 36. Right?
Holy cow.
Failed another business at age 47. Failed to become vice president at the same age. Lost another Senate race at 49 years old.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know this about him. I didn't know that he had all these struggles.
Yeah. The dude's fallen down and had challenge after challenge after challenge. That's why so many good quotes and so much excellence and experience comes out of Abraham Lincoln. And then finally at age 52, he becomes a president of the United States.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. Can you imagine what would it be like if Abraham Lincoln wasn't president?
Unrecognizable, man.
Yeah. So, Steve Jobs is another one. I'm an iPhone guy, so could you imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, he completely changed technology and the way that we interact with technology and the way that we interact with each other, right? I mean, social media access through mobile devices, right?
Yeah.
The iPhone, music industry, all that stuff. He had a huge impact, and it was his persistence that got him there, right? And we all benefit from his persistence.
And when you say that, it's like we can see the results. But when you think about that list that Abraham Lincoln had to endure and go through those challenging times and trials that he had, I mean, saying the word persistence is easy to say, but man, think of all those things.
Yeah.
Right? And there's so many things going on in the world with individuals and people that they have to persevere. They got to dig deep and find out, who they are and what their why is. And so I think of perseverance, and it's like, is it something we're born with? Is it something that is handed to us as in the gene pool? And I've really come to the conclusion that it's not always something that you just inherit or have. There might be some help, from parents or influences.
Sure.
But it's certainly something you learn.
Yeah, definitely a learned trait.
Yeah.
Definitely something that you pick up along the way.
And so perseverance to me, and just in a short explanation, I mean, we have so much evidence, and success leaves clues, right? And some of these names that we've mentioned are good clues. They're good examples. They're evidence of perseverance and staying persistent. So I think about when things get hard and everybody else sits down, those who persevere are the ones, when it's getting hard, they stand up. They even stand taller.
Right.
Right. And so knowing what your why is one of those reasons why it's a little bit easier to stand taller and persevere, keep going.
Absolutely. I think this is this is the time when when we talk about channeling your passions, right?
Yeah.
When you get engaged with something that you're passionate about, it's easier to maintain persistence in that one thing, right?
Right.
So whatever you do, Neck Nation, and this is your why too, right? Finding your why could be part of channeling your passions, but make sure that whatever you're engaged in, you're fully engaged. That
Right.
you've got the passion, that it is your solid why, so that when things do get hard, when times get tough, you can muster up that courage to maintain that persistence, to keep fighting, to get back up, whatever it is,
Yep.
right? To Rocky Balboa your way
Right.
through these challenges, right?
Third monkey your way onto the ark.
There you go.
I mean, that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
You know, I hear people talk all the time, hey, I start a business and I'm going to try it for this long or whatever. Anytime you try anything for something for so long, I was teaching my kids how to deep start a slalom ski. There's a lot of youngsters that don't do it anymore because it's hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, the first question they ask, how long is it going to take to figure out? I'm like, frick, I don't know.
As long as it takes, man.
How bad do you want it?
Yeah.
Right? And so, exactly. That's the right answer. You know, when you have a kid and he doesn't walk at 6 or 7 months, how long are you going to give him?
As long as it takes.
As long as
Just
it
like
takes.
we talked about,
right?
yeah.
So anyways, those are good examples, and perseverance, that's exactly what it is. That's the difference. So I think about some of the reasons, how do we develop perseverance? If we don't have that perseverance in us, or our, you know, and we don't ever give up, and if you see us fighting the monster, help the monster type of attitude, right?
Yep.
Then what do we got to do to develop it, right?
Yeah. And this goes back to our why. I think
Right.
this goes back to our why and to our passions, right? Because if it's something that that you just don't really care about, or that you're on the fence about, or you won't.
Right.
You just flat out will not persevere. You won't do what it takes to overcome the obstacles and the challenges.
Right.
And you just got to be real with yourself in those situations,
Yeah.
right? Or in those situations, you need to find your reason why you want to accomplish that, or do whatever it is that you're engaged in, right? And let that be the reason that you persist
Yep.
or persevere.
There's always got to be a deeper reason why we persevere.
Yeah.
Right. And finding that's important. So number one, to developing it is to know our why. Right. And we had a whole podcast about that. And so that's super important.
Yep.
I think, and there's several, but let's just list the top three. And number two is to have a plan, to really know, have a plan A, a plan B, a what if, all those plans, because you know what? Challenges are going to come. You know they're going to come.
They are.
Right? So you got to be able to stick and move. You got to be able to adjust and adjust on the fly and figure it out. If something's not working, stick and move. Find something that does, right?
I think along with that too is the planning gives you an opportunity to anticipate, right? So that you know challenges are coming, and there'll be some that surprise you.
Sure.
Absolutely, we got to bake that into the plan. But you'll also be able to plan for roadblocks and things that you know that you're going to have to overcome. So when you face those, you've prepared yourself, right? And that you're you have more ability to persevere in those situations because you were prepped.
Right. Yeah, it's important. And you can even do this, you know, on a day. Like the day before, you write down what you want to get done the next day. So when you spring out of bed, you're already ready. Right?
Yeah.
You know exactly what
Off
you're
to
doing.
the races.
Right. And what you want to learn, or what, even if you're running to work or running to whatever it is, an obligation that you have that day, there's still things that you want to accomplish in between.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And if you write those down and you know that's your plan, and if something comes up, you always kind of push and find a way, because if you write it down, it just does something to you mentally, right?
It does.
To push through. So that's number two. And then number three is to take action, obviously, right? Nothing happens without action. And I think the action we need to take is measurable action.
Yeah.
Right? So it's identifiable. It's like, I wasn't actively thinking about it, or I wasn't actively scrolling through the classifieds trying to find it, but I was actually taking measurable action.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Studying or prepping is activity.
Is motion, right? We talked about that's the motion. It's not exactly the action.
Yeah. So I think if we did those three things, we're going to develop some persistence and being aware. will develop persistence, right?
Yep, absolutely, we will.
So I think those are some of the biggest things that we can do, Neck Nation. I mean, there's obviously a lot more steps, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Abraham Lincoln got up and went through those 3 steps. That dude was just a grinder.
Yeah, he for sure was. I've actually got a personal story about perseverance, but
Okay.
I want to preface this with, sometimes in life you might lose it, and sometimes in life you might have it.
Right.
Right. And it depends on where you are, what your mental state.
For sure.
It depends on, are you channeling your passions? We've talked about that. I don't want to beat that anymore. But so along back, how old was I? I think I was like 17 or 18 years old. And I was at a desert race, and I was racing. And at the time I was in the novice class. I was actually racing my dad's bike because I had just sold mine. So I was on this 2004 KTM 450.
Right.
And I was going good that day, Kit. I was going good for a C class rider, and I was second overall in the C class, and I think there was probably about 100 people in the C class that day. And it was the Cherry Creek National was the race, and it was 93 miles long, and at mile 92 they had the creek crossing.
Right.
We had to cross Cherry Creek, right? And it was 18 inches, 20 inches deep, so not super deep, but for riding on a dirt bike, I mean, that's considerable. That's up to the top of your front wheel pretty much, right? And so I've been racing this whole race, doing really good. Fitness felt really good, sitting in second place, first in my class, second in my division, right? And I get to this creek, and the bike, I get right to the other side of the creek, and the bike cold fouls, right? It quits because, the cylinder got the water on it, the cylinder shrank, piston stop, just cold fouled the bike.
Yep.
And I sat there trying to start this thing, and it wouldn't, there was nothing. Wasn't going to happen. So in desert racing, they put a tape on your fender. And as you go through checkpoints, they mark your tape. They put a check on there to make sure that you're not cutting course, right? I said, well, the only option I have right now is to rip that tape off and start running for the finish. And so I ripped that tape off the fender at mile 92, dude. And I started booking. I started running as fast as I could in those 10-pound boots.
That's awesome.
Right, running for the finish, because this was the persistence, right? I had this at this time in my life. And there wasn't anything that was going to stop me from finishing that race. And I watched guys go by as I was hoofing it and running to the finish. And one guy kind of felt bad for me. One of the spectators felt bad for me. So, I got a half mile down there, and he's like, hop on my four-wheeler. And so I hopped on his four-wheeler, and he took me the rest of the way to the finish. And come to find out, both the bike and the rider have to cross the finish line. So I DNF'd that race, but, nothing was going to stop me from getting to that finish. And then as I go through, as I think about periods in my life, there's been times where I have not been that persistent. Admittedly, I haven't carried that same persistence, right? And it's something that I look back on all the time, and I'm like, man, if I could be that kid again, or if I could be that guy again and have that type of persistence, what could I accomplish? Right. So I guess the idea here, Neck Nation, is sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't, but you can always get it back.
Yeah. I don't think you ever lose it. It's just you lose sight of that, purpose or that drive, and that comes along with that persistence. I mean, we lose sight of things all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's the life we lose in living. It's like we're living so hard and so fast, and there's so much going on and so much commotion. It's easy to lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important that anyone listening to this, man, congratulations, because you're trying to do, what better yourself today so you can be a better person tomorrow. And it's awesome. That's what it takes. It just takes that grind. It takes that mental grind, just like your physical grind to prep for that race, right?
Yeah.
It takes that mental toughness and awareness. And the only way we can prep for that is take time out and do it.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just as important, man. It really is to keep our mind sharp and be aware, because when our mind knows how powerful we are, bro, forget about it. When someone says no, you're going to think they said on, and you're ready to get it on.
Yeah, let's go then.
So, and that's awesome. And it's something that you leave that legacy and that example for others too, and when you think someone's not watching, they are. And so that's always something good to remember, especially when you have kids.
Yeah. The other thing that I think about is we have got to be persistent, because people and companies and whatever it is, media, they are all persistent with you personally, Neck Nation. There are people and other entities and whatever in your life. They are persistent with you every single day, and they're going to try everything they can to get you to do what they want or buy their product or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And we really can't afford not to be persistent for ourselves in our own pursuits, right?
You know who else is super persistent?
Who's that?
Our boy Lucifer.
Oh, dude, yeah, he's persistent.
I mean, bro, that guy's got an agenda, right?
No kidding, man.
He's hammered down all the time. He ain't taking his boot off your neck.
Nope, there's no breaks.
Right. So we got to be persistent just to keep the devil's boot off our neck, right?
Yep.
So there's a couple good reasons right there why.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right. The media is persistent.
Yeah.
But and so is the adversary, and so is a lot of things. So truth is, we got to rise up. We got to measure up, level up.
Do good for yourself.
Yeah, we got to be persistent as well.
Yeah.
Since everything else outside is persistent, let's follow the leader, man.
No kidding.
We'll be our own leader on our own persistence. So
absolutely.
I got a story about these 6 broke men. Do you want to hear it?
Oh, story time, brother.
Story time. So, I mean, it's just kind of a funny story, but it puts it in perspective. There's a wise man that had a bunch of money, and his whole quest in life was to find this treasure, right? This hidden treasure that nobody could find. It was a big deal to him. He spent several decades looking for it. And when he'd finally found it and knew for a fact that where it was, and he had this map and he had all these things, and he set out to go get it, and he got 50 miles in. He's like, frick, I'm way too old, dude. I'm going to end up dead in the desert, right? Yeah. And so it was like 500 miles from where he was located, and cameling in the desert and going that far in that heat with those extreme conditions. He goes, I can't do it. And so what he did is, everybody knew he was kind of the wise man in the village, and everyone knew he had a little bit of bread. He had some money and he had some wisdom. And so when he calls a meeting, people pay attention. So he called a meeting, but it was invitational only. And he had selected 12 people, 12 men to come and to meet with him in his quarters. And so he meets with these men, tells them a little bit about it, and he goes, it's going to be hard. I'm telling you right now, I went 50 miles and I freaking turned around because it's going to be hard. But I know right where it's at. It's going to be rewarding. So he did tell them how hard it was going to be, how many challenges and what to look out for. And he laid out a plan and talked about the adversity they're going to face. But then he talked about the reward. And so only 6 of the men were down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The other 6, but they're like, yeah, no, I'm good.
Dang.
So 6 bounce. And the 6 that remained were very poor, right? And they were hungry, so to speak. And so, and they stuck around. And out of the 6, there was one. His name was Koufax, and this guy said, okay, guys, we're going to prep, and this one you're going to leave, and this is how it's going to go. And so they make all the preparations, and they said, who's going to be in charge? And he hands the map to Koufax. He goes, he's going to be in charge. And they're like, dude, I can read a map better than him, and I've been on this journey and that journey. He goes, that guy's a finisher. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, whatever he starts, he finishes. That's his strength. I don't care if he can read the map. He's going to hold the map. He's going to be in charge because of that one trait. He's one of those guys, you see him fighting the monster, help the monster.
Just get done.
You know what I mean? He just finishes whatever it is he started. Done. And so he's obviously left that reputation and that legacy. And so it followed him. That's point number 1, right? Yeah. To remember. And so anyways, they set off on this journey. The date comes they take off. 100 miles in, 3 dudes were like, yeah, no, this is stupid. We're out.
Dang.
Right? It's hot.
Dropping like flies, man.
Yep. So then there were just 3 that remained. 200 miles in, 220 miles in. The other 2 were like, yeah, dude, we're done. We're almost out of water, da-da-da-da-da. It's hard, and I don't even like camels. So I'm going back. So Kovacs was on his own, and he got like 400 and something miles, and he couldn't go. He ran out of water. I mean, he couldn't go any further. He was actually passed out in the middle of the desert. 2 guys come along from the neighboring village. They find him. And, I mean, he couldn't remember his name. He didn't know where he was at. And so they took him back to their house. They hydrated him, let him rest, and, tended to him a little bit, gave him some tea. And when he came to, they're like, what's up? You're just out there taking a nap in the desert or what? And he's like, no, I'm headed to this destination. And they're like, oh, you looking for he goes, yeah, I know where it's at. I'm looking for the treasure, and I know where it's at. So he sits down. And he goes, "Will you guys help me?" And so they make a plan. They said, "Yeah, we want a piece of the pie, though." And he's
Sure.
like, "No problem, right? You saved my life, so
Yeah.
I owe it to you." So, anyways, they put another plan together, finish the journey, find the treasure, and the news spread back to his town, right, faster than he realized. And so he became very wealthy. He got the reward,
Yeah.
had some new friends. And when he finally got back to town, and paid the guy that paid for the venture and had this quest and the map and everything, his family was grateful. And here's this guy who has a PhD, dude. He's poor, hungry, and dedicated, right? And he goes out there, grinds it out, doesn't give up, almost dies. And that's kind of an extreme thing, but that's what it takes, right?
That is what it takes.
That's
yeah.
that perseverance. That's that eye of the tiger. I don't care what you call it. That's that focus, right?
Yeah, it's in that moment where you think you can't do any more,
Yeah.
right? Where you're on death's doorstep, whether it's proverbially or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You're on death's doorstep. You're at the very end of your rope, whatever it is. That's when the payoff is.
Yep. And when you got nowhere to turn, it seems like the last 5 yards are the hardest.
Yeah.
In everything we do, you know what I mean? It's like when you start out, your momentum, you're ripping and running, dude, and you're kind of coasting, and you're feeling it, right? Because you're new, you don't know any better.
Right.
Whatever it is, whatever venture it is. But as you get further into it, you start doing the same thing, and you take the experience of what doesn't work and what, and you start beating yourself up or putting rocks in your backpack or start adding the load you're putting, you're making your journey heavier for no reason. So we are our own worst enemy. But as you get down the road a little bit further, you start to learn what some of the challenges are, and then you create your own.
Yeah.
Right. Which is stupid. We do it. We all do it.
Yep.
So
For sure.
I think it's a good lesson about with Koufax. So there's a quote. You want to read this quote by
I'll go ahead and read
Coolidge?
this quote.
It's freaking good.
Yeah,
man.
I'm going to read this quote. So if you're watching on YouTube, sorry, but I'm going to look at this this whiteboard for just a second to read this. But yeah, this is by Calvin Coolidge. It says, "Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius, almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan 'Press On' has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race."
Man.
That's powerful, man.
Yep.
Right? There's a lot in there.
Yeah. You know what? I love that quote.
Yeah.
And from one of the former presidents of our United States of America. That's cool.
Yeah.
He just said, dude, stop panty wasting and press on.
And press on.
And sometimes it's what we need to hear. You know what I mean? And sometimes there are certain things it's better to cut your losses and move on. That's not called persistence. That's called being smart.
Yeah, being smart. And I think the other thing, too, that quote says is you don't have any excuse to not be persistent. Right? It doesn't matter if you don't consider yourself to be a genius or if you're uneducated or whatever it is, right? You there's no excuse because there's people who are those things that aren't persistent.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the most important things is I look back in my life when I think about giving up, and I'm talking to whoever out there right now that's thinking about giving up. When you start thinking about giving up on life, and that's why we started this whole podcast, when you start thinking about giving up on life, you're only thinking about your own problems, right?
Yeah.
You're internalizing everything, and you're only thinking about yourself. You're not thinking of those that'll be affected on the outside. You're not thinking of your why. You're not thinking of the loved ones. You're not thinking of all these other things that are so much more important. And so it's really easy to get in a dark spot. It's really easy to get into a moment, but we need to take that moment of clarity and of that perseverance and persistence and say, hey, look, I'm going to pull my head up and I'm going to look outside of me, because when we're in that spot, we're only looking at our own problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we look up, look at someone else's problems, man, someone's always got it worse. Right.
Yep.
And if we persevere, that'll just be a talking point or a badge of honor that you push through. Right. A confidence builder. And so I think those things are super important. So if our message rings to anybody today, it's press on, don't give up, right?
Yep.
And persevere, keep going.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a great point, Kit, that the most important person that we can persevere or be persistent for is ourselves in our journey of life.
Yeah.
I think that is absolutely, I love that, Kit, that is the message of today, right?
Yeah.
So, well, Neck Nation, if you like this message, if you like the podcast, be sure to like this video and subscribe on YouTube. The podcast is on all kinds of things, right? Everywhere. Anywhere you get your podcasts, iHeart, Spotify, Google Podcasts, it's on all of those things. So if you're too busy to watch the YouTube, go ahead and listen to it. But we're also on the social media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Follow us on our social media. We post some cool stuff, some cool videos, reels, photos, and things of what we're up to. And also we've got some neck gear on NECKROOTS.com. So if you like the hats and the t-shirts and stuff we're wearing, go ahead and check that out. But we'll leave you with that message today. Thank you for listening, and bless up, Neck Nation.
Bless up. Thanks for joining us.